Bonjour and hello, I'm James, and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2024 Meighen Forum. The Stratford Festival's Meighen Forum is a festival within the festival, designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season through compelling discussions, small-scale, exciting performances, and engaging multi-sensory events and workshops. Enjoy!
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Miles, and I'm the Meighen Forum Director, and I would like to welcome you to our final day of events as part of Global Theatre Week here at the Forum. Our topic today is about Ecodrama, a new approach to telling stories about the climate crisis through live performance. For thousands of years, Indigenous people across the globe have been sharing stories deeply connected to the land and the vital importance to respect all living things and Mother Earth. And this continues today. The ancestral guardians of this land and its waterways, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Attawandaronk, continue to call this land home and act as its stewards, and this responsibility extends to all of us to take action, continue learning about and caring for this land for generations to come. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel today. Colleen Murphy. Hey, Colleen. Is a winner of the 2016 and 2007 Governor General's Literary Award for English Language Drama for her plays Pig Girl and The December Man. Colleen is one of Canada's leading playwrights and is a member of the Order of Canada. Her other plays include The Breathing Hole, shortlisted for the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize and the Carol Bolt Award. The Society for the Destitute presents Titus
Buffonius.
Yeah, I practiced that last night. Yeah. I hope my heart, and her other play, I Hope My Heart Burns First, Armstrong's War, The Goodnight Bird, The Piper, and Beating Heart Cadaver. A librettist and award-winning filmmaker, she has been writer-in-residence at 7 universities and playwright-in-residence at 2 Canadian theatres, as well as at Finborough Theatre in the UK. Welcome, Colleen. Elizabeth, I'll do better on this one. Elizabeth Freestone is the Associate Director of the RSC, and she's come here from the UK just for us today, so you're very special. She's a theatre director, creative consultant, and environmentalist. She has directed plays for the Royal Shakespeare Company, Manchester Royal Exchange, the Citizens Theatre Glasgow, the Young Vic, and Shakespeare at the Tobacco Factory, amongst others. And she's a former artistic director of Pentibus, a new work touring company. She offers strategic advice and creative and environmental consultancy in both a paid and volunteer capacity for various organizations, as well as teaching and mentoring young artists. She has a master's degree in environmental humanities from Bath Spa University, and she's currently doing her PhD at the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford, England.
The other Stratford.
We're very excited that she made the trip across the pond to be with us here today, so welcome, Elizabeth. Randall Martin is a veteran forum guest. He is an emeritus professor at the University of New Brunswick and an adjunct research professor at Western University. And, I wrote here, he's a forum fan favorite. His book, Shakespeare and Ecology, was published in 2015, and in 2018, he co-edited a special issue of Shakespeare Bulletin with University of Exeter lecturer Evelyn O'Malley on Eco-Shakespeare in Performance. From 2019 to 2022, he led an international research in performance project. Randall?
Cymbeline in the Anthropocene.
There you go. That project, Cymbeline in the Anthropocene, has also been featured on CBC Radio Ideas. His article, Creation, Recreations, Becomings, about Lucretian and Darwinian variation in nature, was published in 2023. And this year, his talks on Eco-Shakespeare are being presented at a festival in Verona, as well as here, and part of the forum. This event this morning and the event this afternoon, Randall and I work closely together to curate, so it's a real pleasure for us to welcome Randall to the stage, and I will pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie, for that gracious and fulsome introduction. Thank you, everybody, and welcome to this panel on Ecodrama. I'd like especially to thank also Colleen and Elizabeth for coming from both nearish and farther distances to join me and introduce Ecodrama to you this morning. What I think we're going to do is offer a kind of primer in Ecodrama, assuming people have maybe not that much acquaintance with what it is and why one does it. And so I think because I'm the academic, besides these two eminent practitioners, I'll do what academics usually do. I'll offer some definitions. I'll offer some discussion points. I'll throw out some discussion headings, and then I'll invite Colleen and Elizabeth to talk about them from their experiences and their perspectives. So I have four discussion questions to put out there about Ecodrama. First of all, what it is, what it does, how it works, and why it's important. So what, how, and why. So let's start off with, that's going to be the format. So let's start off with what it is. Well, most simply, Ecodrama tells new stories about environmental issues through theatrical performance. So let's unpack that a little bit. Ecodrama is another kind of way of making drama new, making it contemporary. Every stage company wants to connect with their audiences. They want to put on plays that are accessible. They want to put on plays that are meaningful, that excite people. They want to make that connection, that visceral, emotional connection. Well, Ecodrama does that by illuminating the environmental connections between people and environments, by connecting things at big scales to smaller scales. That is, environmental questions are, of course, about the big issues of our planet. They're about Earth systems. They're about climate change, these huge things. And in some ways, the principal task of Ecodrama is to bring that all down to earth and connect it with individualized, personal experiences. How does that affect people in their everyday lives? So making that connections between, we might say, the global and the local and the personal. That, I think, is its first priority. And I'll invite Colleen and Elizabeth to say something about that. I think we can also reframe what Ecodrama is in terms of what artistic director Anthony Cimolino has set up as the theme for this season. And he says that this season's plays are organized around the theme of a world elsewhere. And that means Ecodrama similarly takes people on journeys into rethinking how we feel and behave towards the natural world, and rethinking our relationships, our essential relationships with environments and the natural world. But in doing that, I think Ecodrama also confronts something I'd call the Lucretius problem. And the Lucretius problem is this. In the first century, in his poem in Latin, but it's been, of course, translated into almost every language, On the Nature of Things, Roman philosopher and poet Lucretius observed that people only tend to think things in the world are real if they fall into what they've known personally, experienced and perceived. So if they're outside of that personal experience, maybe they're not so real. Maybe they don't feel known. Now, I think those horizons of experience are changing for us. We all know that winters are getting shorter. We all know that the multiple floods we hear about in the news are not just once-in-a-century events. They're becoming more and more common. We all know that wildfire smoke, which blankets cities in North America, that's not normal. So things are changing. So we do have, through the news, we have a sense that, we're addressing big changes in the near future, right now, that are happening to us. They're impacting us now. Nonetheless, I think the Lucretius problem explains climate hesitation for some people, because for many people, things related to it like rising sea levels, like melting Antarctic ice sheets are just too far away. They're just too distant. and people can't really connect with them. And the news, of course, environmental calamities are now part of our daily news, and they're just part of that daily news cycle, and it's there, and we consume it, and then it's over. So what Ecodrama does is it tries to bring those problems into our living rooms, into our kitchens, connect them with daily lives, and make them feel real, make the near future, make the now feel that it's relevant today. Colleen and Elizabeth, would you like to comment on that connection of scales and making it personal and making it new?
I mean, Shall I? It's so interesting to hear you speak about that cognitive fallacy, really, Randall, that we can know and yet not know. And I wonder if something that ecodrama is theatre can be used as a conduit to translate the fact of the climate crisis into felt experience. And it's that process from turning fact into feeling that I think is the primary raison d'etre, really, of ecodrama, and where its purposefulness will actually come as well, that it can then be useful in the world as we all sort of reassess what it is to live in a climate-inflected world today. And I think what you've just said about that it can make these extraordinarily large, complex, multifarious, interconnected ideas that span place and time digestible, human, relatable, accessible, and it takes obviously the skill of writers like Colleen in order to do that, to make it feel that this is something that we can grasp and we can understand and we can wrestle with, and we can do so in the public civic forum of theatre, which is the best place to have those kinds of conversations.
Yes, and I think the stage, I mean, you sitting in this room right now, I'm looking at you, but I'm also looking at these beautiful trees and a river. How do we bring the world that's happening right now, how do we bring it on stage? Well, that's what theater does. It can actually put the natural world on stage. It can actually offer back to the audience a reflection that is really personal, and that isn't about finger wagging or anything like that, but it's an emotional experience. It is very, very, very hard, as you say, to grasp what the climate emergency is. And I live in downtown Toronto. We just went through a big flood, which is not terribly common, but it's very hard to grasp until it creeps up into your basement, right? And then it's real. And I believe the stage can make it real and real in a way that we can feel it rather than just read about it in the news, so that it's not so easy to dismiss. And that the experience we have isn't about, this is a play about climate change, it's really important, you got to see it. But it's an emotional, intimate experience that gives you something, a new recognition that we're all part of it.
Yes, that's beautifully said. Thank you very much from both of you. Yeah. I'd like to go on, I think, now to think about what ecodrama does. So we get a little bit more into the nuts and the bolts of it. Picking up on what Colleen just said about kind of what it does and what it is, there's no single way of doing ecodrama. It does bring the complex and the global into the personal, but there's no single way of doing it. It's not a particular genre. It can be tragedy, comedy, and usually a mix of that. There's no particular set of formulas. There's no easy way of thinking about, we check off these points and bam, we've got ecodrama. Instead, it's really more, and this is, I'm picking up on what Colleen just said, it's more a commitment, I think. It's a commitment by playwrights. It's a commitment by people who design theater, who produce theater, to put the emphasis on the environmental, to rethink environmental questions, and make them conscious. Make it part of the conscious enterprise of writing a play and putting on a play. So I think that's something about what it does, and how we do it. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think so. And I think, in its simplest form, I think it can do it in two ways. One is by reassessing the existing canon of work, from the Greeks all the way through to, Ibsen, Brecht, up until the present day, and looking at those plays and saying, actually, if we reread those through this particular filter, through this prism of thought, what are the latent narratives that we can amplify or highlight or choose to draw attention to? Many of the Greek classics, for example, are really about geopolitical issues. And we know historically that Athens at that time was already a site of environmental destruction. And when you reread some of those plays about resource wars or, interpersonal conflicts in that filter, if you were then to program that work, you could then choose, as you say, through a directorial choice, casting choices, design choices, choose to amplify the themes that are there in those plays. The other is of course, by commissioning new plays and speaking to new work that speaks very directly. Work for playwrights that speak to the climate crisis. And that might be hyperlocal to a specific, place, town, nation, theatre company, or those could be plays that become kind of global in concern. But I think whether you're sort of re-examining an existing piece of work or you're interrogating a new piece of work, you're probably keeping three major things in mind, I would say. I think one is content. So one is, really where are the aspects of the story here that really speak to something to do with the climate crisis. One is form, by which I mean, I think the way in which that story is told. So, for example, in the Breathing Hole, Colleen very beautifully depicts this kind of multi-temporal experience of a single location. So that's a formal experiment that is absolutely designed so that the audience can view the climate crisis in its longest view, both deep into the past and into the future. So that's a kind of a formal sort of writing experiment. And then one, I think, is methodology, which is really the processes by which the work is then put on stage. So that might be making work in a low waste manner, being very mindful of the resources that are used in the making of the work, in the funding of the work, in everything that kind of methodologically happens to bring the work to stage. So for me, it's kind of this triptych of form, content, and narrative that you apply to either existing work or to new work. That together makes an eco-dramatic gesture.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Could I, before I pass things on to Colleen, could I pick up on that word filter? Because I think that's a useful word for thinking about the making the connection between what usually goes on in a play, which is about people and social relations and people's lives and that sort of thing, and the environment. We're here in this room in an environment. Just outside the windows is another environment. And beyond those windows and that river and those trees is the bigger environment. The environment is here and it's everywhere. But we filter, the word that I'm picking up on is filter. We filter the environment, and that's true in traditional plays. It's backdrop, it's scenery, it's local color at best. But it's there, but the emphasis is on the human. It's on human affairs and human relations. I think Ecodrama is about removing that filter or lightening that filter so that the environment comes through more. It's more present. It's more actively even a character, as it is in Colleen's The Breathing Hole. And maybe you'd like to talk about that, how the environment comes in into your play, into that play in particular, and becomes such a huge and fascinating part of that play and of your work in general.
Oh, boy. Okay. Well, The Breathing Hole is a play about the life and death of a 500-year-old polar bear. So it's set in the Arctic in one single place by breathing hole. So you go through 500 years. The first part is when the little bear comes, it's a little baby cub, and is taken up by a woman who wants to adopt the bear. And you see the whole Inuit society. And then almost 200 years later, Franklin comes with his ships and his men. See the bear again. And the bear is the leading character of the play. And the bear is the heart of the play. The bear is the relationship that the audience has, the primal relationship with the bear. That's the only way this play works. And then in the third act is in the future. And in the end, the bear is beaten to death because it's starving and it was trying to climb onto a cruise ship, and it drowns in a sea of oil because by this time there's been a lot of oil breaks up in the Arctic. So I offer the audience the bear. Follow the bear, go with the journey, so that it's not about, I don't like messages in plays. In fact, I find them incredibly reductive and patronizing, and I refuse them. So the offer is emotional. Fall in love with the bear, watch the bear, laugh with the bear, see the bear's tragedy, but also all the other people, and watch the bear die. And your feelings, what you're watching is a big puppet bear drowning. But unconsciously, one may pick up that when you're sad about that and weeping, that bear is us in the future. But there's no message. That's what you take away as feelings. I love the bear. I love the bear. Yeah. Going away from the human and into the animal allows the human person to project into the animal. It's like we all go to movies and there's a puppy, right? You bring your grandkids and the polar bear is the puppy. It's the thing that opens your heart and lets you into the climate and what the climate does and how the climate affects people and their anger and their fear.
That seems to me, if it's all right, Randall,
Yes,
to pick
go
up on
ahead,
that, the how the climate affects us. So I think something about ecodrama is that it gives agency to the more than human world. The environment itself, or our more than human kin, whether that's a bear or a bug. So rather than us seeing the environment as passive backdrop, trees behind the set, or as metaphor for human condition, King Lear's storm is the inner storm. It's not really, actually what it does is say, no, this entity has dramatic agency. It is that is influencing us, and that is relatable to our experience today. Really, this is the background by which we are all now living our lives, whether we're very conscious of it one day because of a specific event like a flood or a fire, or we're just latently conscious of it, sitting inside our fears for our future grandchildren. But this is the context by which we're now living our lives. And so what Ecodrama is trying to do is to look at these plays and say, well, let's foreground that, give that the agency, the dramatic agency, and let that be the dramatic driver of the action of the play. And that is actually a much more dynamic and truthful representation of our experiences today.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the things I most admired about your production of The Tempest last year. Elizabeth directed a fantastic production of The Tempest for the RSC at the beginning of the year. It was January 2023. It was really the first, I think it was really the RSC's first conspicuously environmentally committed production. And the way Elizabeth foregrounded it's going to be our word here, foregrounded the relationship not only of animals, but also everything else, all the other environmental aspects of the ocean island that Caliban is on in The Tempest, and relates to the human drama of the play. Could you talk about your production, which was such a fantastic production? It was mind-blowing.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I guess it was an attempt to do what I've been talking about, to re-examine the canon a little bit. And The Tempest starts with this storm, which is a human-induced storm, after all. Prospero conjures the storm, so it's a brilliant sort of way of thinking about anthropogenic climate change. They're sort of there and then. So the world of the island was a toxic, polluted place. The stage was strewn with rubbish, and this was real rubbish that we had worked with real communities to collect. So we'd worked with volunteer litter picking communities around Stratford upon Avon who had collected rubbish from our lovely river, not dissimilar to your lovely river here. We'd worked with organisations such as Surfers Against Sewage who'd done beach cleans. So everything on stage was real human-made litter. So people came in and they saw this destroyed environment. The action of the play then, amongst all of the kind of the plot itself, showed Ariel, who is the kind of spirit creature in The Tempest, and Ariel's fellow spirits, that they were beings of the island. So they were rock and moss and tree and earth, and the play followed them clearing the island gradually during the course of the play. And they did this by turning everything that was on stage into puppetry, effectively. So there are lots of moments of magic in the play where magical things happen. And we achieved all of our magic in a very kind of lo-fi way, where things that looked like they were just bits and pieces around the stage would suddenly be brought together and become a giant harpy, for example. There's a moment where Ariel turns into a harpy, a kind of a mythical creature. And we did that. She and her spirits kind of had all this, like these black bin baggy sort of things and these broken bits of oil drums that we'd really found, and turned into this ginormous kind of harpy. And Ariel has this extraordinary speech in the play where she looks at the baddie characters, and says, you three creatures of sin, look at what you've done to us, the world. And it was as if the natural world was kind of rising up and voicing its own thoughts back towards these humans who had impacted it. There's a moment where some magical sort of dogs appear and chase off Stefano and Trinculo and Caliban. And we had lots of water containers. I'm sure you have it here, where water bottle plastic is one of our main pollutants. So there were huge water containers that we'd, again, really found in the River Avon. And our puppetry director had worked with us in rehearsal on all of this rubbish. Oh, maybe I should say, so we made the play by rehearsing with the rubbish. We hadn't pre-designed anything. We started with a room full of rubbish, and we rehearsed the play and figured out how we were going to do everything, just drawing on the creativity of everybody involved. So these plastic bottles ended up being, they were kind of cut into a little bit, and a torch sort of shone through them, and they became these extraordinary dogs, and they chased off those people. So by the end of the play, the island was cleared of most of its rubbish, not all of it, because we know that we can no longer completely delete humankind's imprint on this planet, but most of it was sort of cleared. So it was as if the spirit world was, it was fighting back, but it was also helping the humans come to a point of realization and redemption, which is what happens in that play. It is a play about healing, ultimately. And so people were confronted and had to go through these sorts of learning experiences. And there was this ultimate reveal at the end where a very beautiful forest was revealed, which was real organic matter. And we'd worked with local forestry, the local wildlife trust and the woodland trusts, and we coppiced real materials from some of the remaining parts of the Forest of Arden that were real organic materials on stage. It was this very beautiful kind of reveal at the end. And then this kind of became this symbol of hope, that actually if humans can heal their interpersonal conflicts and their intergenerational conflicts, that we can heal the world at the same time. as well. So sorry, that's a very long way of just trying to describe sort of what it means in action, trying to think about giving the environment and the more than human world agency in a play. And of course, on top of that, all the other scenes happened, all the funny scenes and the interesting scenes and the love scenes and the dramatic scenes and the dance and the magic, and it was a very hopeful, I think, and beautiful and gorgeous production. Actually, we made the rubbish beautiful, if that's a possible thing to do. And I guess maybe that's also what I mean about how form and content and methodology are all speaking together. So this was a zero waste production. We made nothing new for it. Everything was made from found materials, costumes, everything was completely recycled. And everything had an afterlife afterwards. So the plastic either went into stores because we made it into something that was quite good and could be used again, or it became recycled, or it became art installations, or it went to local schools and they made their own art installations out of it. The coppiced organic material went back and into the forest and became, sort of deer hurdles and useful things like that, as it was always going to be. So everything then was kind of part of this bigger idea that the life of the stuff wasn't just the life of the production.
Thank you for that.
Sorry,
just bringing back what a fantastic production this was, and what a transformation of The Tempest it was too. Perhaps some people in the audience know The Tempest and have seen productions here at Stratford. I mean, the unspoken thing about The Tempest is it's a very wordy play. It's a very talky play, and frankly, in the theatre, sometimes The Tempest can be a little boring. And this production was the absolute opposite of that, for the way that Elizabeth had thought through these connections between content and form. And it was a spectacle, but it was also a spectacle in the absolute best sense of the word, because everything was integrated. So thank you very much. And that the comments that both of you have made about your respective ecodrama experiences leads me to my second kind of next thought about ecodrama and how it works. Ecodrama does two things, I think, or we can divide it up. Ecodrama creates new plays, like The Breathing Hole, creates new plays about environmental issues and concerns. So contemporary plays about the here and now. And then it also, like Elizabeth's production, it also takes old plays and sees them through the lens sees them through an environmental lens, an environmental perspective, and therefore contemporizes them. And I think both are equally valid, both are equally necessary. I think of, for instance, an original play that perhaps some of you know, Maria Clemence's 2018 play, Burning Vision. It's a play about the impact of Canadian and American uranium mining on a community in the Northwest, a Dene community in the Northwest Territories. And this is happening. The uranium is being mined for the Manhattan Project. So this play is taking place in the late 30s, 1940s. And of course, it's also related, and the play draws on this, to the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan. So there's a new play that talks about environmental history, but also brings it very much into a present that is still very much relevant and with us at the moment. I think we can talk about rescripting plays as well, the second way of doing ecodrama. It takes older plays and rescripts them, adapts them. And that adaptive mode of doing ecodrama was very much part of the international research project that I led, Cymbeline in the Anthropocene, which if you're interested in hearing about, please come along at 2:00 this afternoon and you'll hear a little bit more. And that was a project where I invited theatre companies, 7 theatre companies on 4 continents, each of which they produced Cymbeline through their own environmental experiences, their own local environmental conflicts. And they adapted the play, they rescripted the play, they rewrote the play through that lens and produced something intensely local, but also Shakespearean, and also contemporary. And that was an approach to the play, and also a way I conceived of it as a way of taking Shakespeare's ecological insights and taking them just outside of academia to where they really ought to be. Shakespeare wrote plays, and they should be performed, and they should be part of a civic and public conversation. So my project was attempting to do that. A classic example of an original, perhaps the classic, ecodrama is Henrik Ibsen's An Enemy of the People, written in 1882. And it's a play that sets up a template, really, for ecodrama. It's about it's a play in which a character named Dr. Stockman discovers that the waters in a spa town are polluted and they are toxic. And that creates a conflict with the economic interests of the town. They know if this information gets out there, their livelihoods and the whole town is going to be shut down. And initially they kind of support the fact, oh, you've made this discovery that the spa town's waters are harmful. We should do something about that. And then people think more and more about, well, we're going to be out of jobs. The whole place is going to be shut down for 2 years because we have to relay the pipes in the town for the water. And they turn against him and they drive him out of town. So it sets up a fundamental template between the clash, which we're all familiar with, between economic interests and environmental interests. And that's something we see that in the news almost every day. That's what environmentalism in some ways is about. It's about those two forces coming into collision. So that's an original play, but we can also take that back to Shakespeare plays, for instance, to think about older plays that can be remade through an environmental lens. The Merry Wives of Windsor sets up a similar kind of trade-off or face-off between economic and environmental forces. In that play, it takes place in Windsor. It's Shakespeare's most topical play. It's his most English play, Elizabethan play about the life of a little town in England and the daily lives of people. And at the end of the play, the scene takes place at a giant oak tree, a legendary oak tree, old growth tree called Hearn's Oak. And that's where Falstaff has been sent to have an assignation with Mistress Ford and Mistress Quickly at midnight. So here's this big old growth tree. And it was a legendary landmark in Windsor. And then Shakespeare, in this, what is otherwise a romantic comedy, a wonderful romantic comedy, he puts into that play a saw pit, a very realistic, non-romantic, non-comedic detail. And the townspeople who gather at midnight to expose Falstaff and to punish him gather in that saw pit. And that saw pit is the source of the economic wealth that is driving the consumerism of the rising middle class of Windsor, which we hear about all the time. The Merry Wives of Windsor is just stuffed with information about what people are buying and the new things they're acquiring and the latest this and the latest that, including stuff from the New World that is, becoming new consumer items and status symbol objects. So here we have in that play Shakespeare setting up that, well before Ibsen, that collision between an environmental imperative, the old growth tree, which we're cutting down. And the context of this is also that the price of wood and the price of timber had risen 400% in Shakespeare's lifetime because of deforestation in southern England. And people were actually beginning to turn to coal because it was the cheaper fuel source. And Shakespeare says, here it is. Here's our modern collision between economic and the environmental. So really, we don't think of Shakespeare as being perhaps a particularly environmentalist writer. And he wasn't in a way because his stories are not really about that subject. But there it is. There's the kind of collision that Ibsen then takes and turns into the plot, the narrative of his play. So can we think about your experiences of other plays or other situations that offer that work on that kind of template? Colleen, I know you're working on an adaptation of Enemy of the People, I think, at the moment.
Me and 5,000 other playwrights. Yes. And I love Ibsen. It's brilliant. And I was commissioned to do an adaptation of Enemy and the People with an emphasis on climate change. That's what I was given, and to have it in the 21st century. So here we are. And I tell you, I read that play I don't know how many times, and then I typed it out, the whole play, word by word, because I kept thinking, at the end of the play, the man stands alone. The Dr. Stockman stands there and he says, with his family, and he's going to leave because he's kind of being pushed out of town. And he stands there and he put his hands up and he says, the strongest man is the man who stands alone. And every time I came to the end of the play, I thought, that is not true anymore. Actually, we have to stand as a collective to some extent in terms of climate, right? So, for me, the huge challenge is not to change too much of the structure of the play or the story, because it's very well written. But to take it further, to make it dangerous, to make the end unpredictable and upsetting, and to do it with the children, because there's 2 kids in that play, right? His 2 young boys. And of course, the future always lands on the children. So it is very exciting, but it's a huge challenge. And to do it without wagging fingers to an audience, but also to the other characters in the play. So, yeah, thank you for bringing it up.
I think it's fascinating to look back at the plays in the existing canon and see how writers have been wrestling with these massive issues about where people and place kind of intersect for, like I say, from Aristophanes to Shakespeare to Chekhov. All of those writers are obsessed with deforestation. Like, if you want to really dig in, and that's obviously over thousands of years. I think what's interesting when we do these plays today, then part of it is that we're being made aware of the gap. We're looking back and going, oh, okay, that's what it was like then, and this is what's happening now. And partly we are realizing that our lived experience, because obviously humanity's only been on this earth for, in the grand scheme of things for this amount of time, is their lived experience actually. I think of these writers as our geological contemporaries. They sort of exist in the same epoch as us, effectively, in the same 6th mass extinction event, and that everything that we are going through is in their time span as well. So I feel that these plays come closer to us because we are viewing them through this sort of eco-drama prism or lens. And also, just sort of speaking to contemporary writers, I've been in touch with and worked with a number of writers from different countries around the world about writing new plays about the climate crisis. And what I'm beginning to realize is that the writers from those places where people are on the daily front line are writing plays that are imaginatively stronger, stranger, braver, wilder, to kind of meet this moment, I think. And you can really tell, I think we're certainly the part of the world where I'm from, we are still, I think, very shielded from the most damaging effects of the climate crisis. Yes, we're experiencing flooding every year, and we're beginning, things like that are beginning to happen, but largely the plays from the Western European canon remain policy-based. They remain, new plays that remain about kind of people in suits sort of doing quite a lot of arguing and thinking, and this is going to happen at some point, who's going to do what about it, and that's the kind of realm in which they're existing. But plays from Canada, as we've been discussing, from Australia, there's a whole new genre of theatre in Australia called eco-farce, which is absolutely amazing. There's an amazing play called the Turquoise Elephant by Stephen Carlton, which imagines a group of tourists who are desperate to go to the last everything. They want to see the last snow on Kilimanjaro and see the last polar bear and see the last. And the play kind of spirals out of control. It's built on the structure of a French farce, and it becomes funnier and funnier and wilder as this group of people get more and more desperate. There's also a hilarious play called Kill Climate Deniers by David Finnegan, which he rewrote as the play was being put on because there were protests against the fact that his play was going to be put on. And the play becomes a meta-theatrical meditation, sort of hilarious meditation about what it is to write a climate play when there are people protesting against you being funded to write a climate play. And it goes in these like endless sort of circles. So yeah, extraordinary stuff coming out of Australia. My general experiences of what's happening in South America is that there's this sort of form of kind of eco-poetry almost, I think, is or eco-poetic realism maybe is a more of a descriptive way of thinking about it. So an extraordinary play called Green Duck from an Argentinian playwright, which is sort of a riff on Romeo and Juliet, but kind of placed in this a location that is experiencing the sort of worst impacts of again of sort of deforestation and climate change. So an amazing play called The History of Water in the Middle East by Sabrina Mahfouz about desertification across North Africa and the Middle East. So there is something I sort of only offer that just to give you a sense of the real variety and urgency of much of the work that is being written sort of all over the world. I think this is becoming a global, a kind of a global effort and a global collective, and the plays are getting more and more unignorable, actually, and important. And I think it shows that across we're not just talking about message plays or anything like that. We're talking about anything whether it's about resources or industrialization or extinction or weather or people and place or agriculture. But there are so many genres and forms that this kind of work can encompass as well. It's a very sort of elastic definition. And I think, within that, there are things for audiences on all scales, in all places, of all types and tastes and sensibilities. I don't think it's as narrow, perhaps, as we might assume that it could be.
Mm-hmm. No. Yes, if we think of the daily news, and maybe that's the framework to which anybody comes with thinking, what is ecodrama? It's all about doom and gloom and calamities and tragedies and that sort of thing. There's not much laughter or jollity in it. To think that ecodrama can be funny, it can be amusing, it can be humorous, and you can approach the problem from that genre, that sensibility, tell jokes about it. That is surprising, I think, and it makes me think of Colleen. You made a comment, and we had a little preliminary conversation before today's panel. That ecodrama can make us laugh and it can make us cry at the same time. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? I thought that was a wonderful comment and absolutely true.
Well, as a playwright, I love tragedy, but the form. But I also think that humor is the grease of tragedy. It opens the heart. So I think you have to laugh. Absolutely. Oh my God, all these plays, I got to read them. You have to laugh. But the heart has to be opened. You have to be moved by something you feel because of something you heard or mostly saw, or an interaction. And that's why I kind of like death in plays, because it does offer it offers the possibility of catharsis. And I don't know even if catharsis is necessary in ecodrama. I do not know that yet. But I do think the laugh and cry is essential in ecodrama. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we have to we have to cry about it, don't we, together? And that's what, theatre is a place where we can be a collective and we can laugh and cry in the same shared space. And I think even just to acknowledge that this is frightening. These are frightening times, uncertain times, where everybody is suffering, everybody is confused. Like we're all feeling all of those things. It's not. I think ecodrama is not trying to say here's how we should be, or here's what we you must do, or it's not really about that. It's just, it's almost holding a space, actually. I think one of its gestures is just to hold a space where we can think and feel our way through this together. And it's a safe space, even as it's disturbing and provocative and all of those things.
There are no safe spaces. I think the greatest gift that theater offers us is that it isn't safe. Mm-hmm. It takes us on a journey where we may not know where we're going. So there's many forms of safe, but I understand what you mean. It is a communal thing, and that's why I go back to that thing in Ibsen's play, Cannot Stand Alone. Theater is so communal. It was so terrible during COVID when, I don't know, you're watching stuff on the screen. Ugh, like, we couldn't do this. And this, the communal response, is everything in theater, and it's everything in the climate emergency.
Mm-hmm. A special space. We go into the theater, it's a public space, but we're there with other people, but we're there in ourselves as well. We've turned off our mobile phones, as we're told before every performance, shut off the mobile phones, and we have, amusing little dings and dangs to remind us about that. And then we focus just on that experience of the theater. It's why perhaps a lot of people go to the theater. It's a place where we shut out the world in a way, or shut out all that noise. I come back to that word filter that you used a little earlier. It's a way of filtering that out, and we focus on these questions from different perspectives, other than that which the Daily News, with its tendency to offer the perspectives only through calamity, conflict, that kind of thing, it gives us that kind of alternative. Let's think about. I'll alter the perspective a little bit here, continuing with our idea about how it works, how ecodrama works. And I think another important point to make about ecodrama, which I'll throw out there for Colleen and Elizabeth to comment on, is that ecodrama is it addresses a cultural challenge. Environmentalism, of course, is about science, it's about statistics, it's about graphs, it's about all of that hard information. But ecodrama is about the environmental questions from a cultural point of view, because our environmental problems are essentially really cultural challenges. And what I mean by that is that when we see environmentalism as that conflict, for instance, between economics and environmentalism, that draws on our priorities like economic growth. We have to have continual economic growth. We have to have continual consumption. The consumer economy has to keep going, because that's how our economy keeps going. We need to constantly extract things from the world to keep our whole human world going. So those are economic goals that we set for ourselves, but they're also cultural assumptions, because we know endless economic growth, endless resource extraction, that sort of thing, those are not global goals, but they're very Western-focused goals as well. We know communities like Indigenous communities have very different relationships with the land and how they interact with it and how they care for it. So that's the way in which I'm thinking about environmentalism, and therefore ecodrama, as a cultural challenge. How to bring about cultural change. I think that's one of the imperatives of ecodrama, and to make us rethink some of those fundamental cultural assumptions, perhaps not unexamined cultural assumptions or under-examined cultural assumptions, and I think that's part of the consciousness-raising exercise, I'd say, of ecodrama. Would you do you agree with that, Colleen and Elizabeth? The cultural as a cultural challenge, and can we do it?
I think we can, but yes, it's a way of seeing the world differently. Everything is connected, and everything is somewhat equal. So, if I have a certain cultural mindset or religious mindset, I see the world through that prism. Humans first, and everything else is our dominion. We can cut down the trees and kill the animals, and to shift that is so huge.
Mm-hmm. And hard.
Because people will come to climate change the way they come to climate change, so personally. I do believe it's a personal thing. You can get something from something in the theater that's not the news. Take it home. But it might be 5 years later, you go, oh, and something drops because it's personal. So I believe the cultural change is difficult because it can't come from out here. Mm-hmm. It has to come from in here. But the in here is changed somehow by the out here. So those are my thoughts.
So beautifully put. How do we reimagine actually our own position? And that's an enormous, phenomenal idea. I think something that theatre allows us to do is to rehearse different versions of ourselves, and I think that's part of the conversation with an audience. It's a kind of a collective role play, all the time. What if I were in that position? What if I were doing that? What if I felt that? What if that happened to me? How would I react in that situation? Asking ourselves just to deeply engage with the what if. The next extension of that is, what if we could build a different kind of society? What if we had different kinds of structures? What if we can imagine ourselves through these self-imposed sort of thresholds and boundaries into an alternative way of being? The borders of theatre are porous. Our conversations there's a co-exchange that happens, I think, between the work on stage and the work in the audience, and somewhere in that there is a shared potential for reimagining. I always feel very conscious in my own work to try and offer some, not just to, lean into the particular truth that I'm amplifying, but also to offer just the door opening to an alternative. What else and what if. And just to gently put those thoughts out, so they can kind of, not that I have the answers to them, but that we just sit with that idea as a community in the theatre space.
We can feel some hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, I think that's very important, to leave the audience with a sense of hope, because otherwise, then it's pure tragedy, and it ends up being boring.
But pure tragedy
really.
can be hopeful. Do you know what I mean? Through that emotion, through that catharsis, can come hope. I have to believe that, because I think that tragedy does have that power. That you don't crawl out of the theater on your hands and knees and slit your throat. Good tragedy opens your soul, and you walk out of the theater moved in some way, shifted in some way, and it's quite a beautiful feeling, rather than a down feeling. Anyway, that's
feelings are important. I think that this has come up in both of your comments, that it's about Ecodrama is about hearts and minds, and especially about hearts. I think it's about making us feel that addressing environmental issues is important, and that we're convinced at that level of it may not happen immediately, but at some point in the future, hopefully the near future, when it touches us personally, that we feel, okay, my attitude towards this is going to change, or maybe I'll make a slight change in my consumer habits, or maybe I'll do this or do that, becomes a political thing that we might change for. I think this is something that eco-critics have emphasized, going back to the earliest environmentalists, is that we can think things, we can know what is the right thing to do? I think we know what we can do, what we have to do to decarbonize, what we have to do to address climate change, and what we need to do for the future. We know that kind of intellectually, we know that scientifically, that sort of thing, but we have to feel it. That's something I think uniquely that ecodrama can offer, because when we're in that theater, we laugh and cry and we experience that emotional journey, and that's extremely important. And that's the only way that people are, I think, in some ways, basically convinced by things, when they feel it's right and when they feel it's necessary. So the emphasis on feelings, I think both of you have conveyed that. And it comes out in many, this is my opportunity to say, comes out in many of the plays discussed in this book. This is a book that Elizabeth and Jeannie O'Hare co-edited. It's called 100 Plays to Save the World. And it's an absolutely fantastic digest of international plays, not all of which are particularly ecodrama. There might be plays that have eco affinities, we might say, or environmental affinities, and are from around the world. And so they offer a synopsis of the play and then a little description of how they might be produced and how they might be thought of in environmentalist terms through that kind of perspective. Highly, highly recommended. I enjoyed this book very much.
Features Colleen's work.
So, yes. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I'm seeing that it might be time to. We've thrown a lot out there, and it might be time to set the process in. Oh, there we are. Another one. Okay. To invite some comments and questions from the audience. So I'll start with this. First question or first comment. Fire is for many Canadians the most evident and feared expression of the climate crisis, but it's very challenging to incorporate on stage. How would you do so? And what plays do you know of which use fire as a focus of ecodrama? Great question. Great question, both from a conceptual point of view and a practical making it point of view. Any thoughts about that?
I'm trying to think of a play too. I mean, I totally agree. Fire is terrifying. How do you do that on stage? How do you terrify with some red light and I don't know. You know, I believe it can be done. But I don't know how.
I can perhaps offer, while you're thinking about this, offer an example. In one of the contributing plays to my project, our project, Cymbeline in the Anthropocene, one production was from Australia. From Melbourne, Australia. And the director and adapter, Rob Conkey, he wrote the play, adapted the play through the lens of the Australian wildfires, and particularly the devastating fires of 2019. And going back, and we all know, we've seen this in the news, Australia's had horrific wildfires, massive destruction of both of plant, people, not so much people, not many people have died, but animal life has just been catastrophic and just heart-wrenching. And he rewrote the play and redirected the play through the lens of wildfires. And the very last scene in Cymbeline, perhaps some of you have seen it in the wonderful Stratford production this season. It ends with a series of revelations in which the 5 plot lines, at least, of Cymbeline all come together at the end, and Shakespeare does this amazing thing of tying them all together, and there's a series of revelations, and it's all fantastic and happy. He took a darker turn. He set the last scene of Cymbeline in a fire rescue station. So the kind of station that was set up in Australia for people and animals who were both injured and traumatized by the wildfires of 2019. And it was the play Cymbeline, but by putting it in that context, it made those revelations just a titch more tragic, tilted the play in a darker direction, brought out the more, Cymbeline, technically speaking, is a tragic comedy, and so brought out more of the tragedy of the play, and created a wonderful ecodramatic adaptation in the process. So that was a play that really it didn't rewrite the play so much in terms of wildfire, although it also turned the framing plot is between the British and the Romans, and they have a war, and that was turned into fighting wildfires when the government refused to fund firefighting management techniques and that sort of thing. That was an element of the play. But that was one thing I can think of. Any other thoughts about that?
I can't think of any. I do know that I will be writing a play about fire.
No.
Because I saw a picture, because things start with images of a completely orange fire, almost completely orange, and you can see a red fox who is almost orange running. Well, it's a photo, it's still, and it is so evocative. I saw that, I grabbed it, I put it on my computer, and you go, okay, that's a play. Don't know, but you're right, like fire. I grew up north of Lake Superior in the bush. And, in those days, there wasn't a whole lot of fires up there, but that was the big thing. And one day, there was a fire close to the town, Manitowoc. And we all thought we were going to die. It was a town of 3,000 people because there was nowhere to run. Everything was bush. And there was like a little 2-lane highway going down to Trans-Canada Highway. It was so scary. And it's so real now. Because we never thought about heat. We thought, somebody threw a cigarette butt when they were, fishing. It's so totally different now. But that fox, oh my God.
We'll wait for that.
I could just offer a general thought. When I heard the question, the word that came into my head was encroachment. And there is something very dramatically powerful about the idea that something is coming towards you. And a number of plays kind of lean into that feeling that the offstage world is coming. It's getting closer and closer. An Enemy of the People does it in a slightly different way. It's the contaminated water under our feet that's going to kind of come through our water system. So there are a number of plays, I think, Macbeth is a classic example that something is coming to sort of towards us and we are stuck and there's nothing we can do about it. And I guess dramatists can make choices about whether we're setting work in the aftermath of that fire event or the energy before, the energy as that ticking clock is coming closer and closer, because that's a very powerful dramatic tool, because we can imagine the offstage world kind of coming towards us in the sense of encroachment. So I think it's the literal representation of fire on stage in a way you don't have to worry too much about it. You can do that through all kinds of suggestive ways.
Like dread.
Exactly. It's kind of exactly that. But actually the dramatic function of the idea of that kind of fire or encroachment in whatever form, I think is a very powerful and useful energy and metaphor to draw on.
Yes. Well, thank you. Those are wonderful answers to that question. Let's move on to, we've got a number of things here, so let's move on. How can experiencing ecodrama inspire and support environmental movements? Is it an agent for wider change, political change, economic change, and individual change? We touched on that a little earlier. Can we expand on that further in terms of this excellent question?
I would say all of those things. I go back to the old ideas of theatre as a public storytelling forum, effectively, and whether that's in the world of the Greeks or in different indigenous communities, or what the public storytelling serves a democratic function. So it is there for us to rehearse our different versions of ourselves, to learn how to navigate our way through really complex ideas, and then to go back out into the world changed in some way by that experience, whether that means personally changed or inspired to activism or able to call for greater political change. I think all of those things are absolutely possible through ecodrama in whatever form it is, definitely.
And that's part of the hopeful, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's part of the hopeful.
Yeah.
Yes.
The hope is that there's going to be change. And there will be, as the encroachments gets closer. You know how people, they act differently. When you get more afraid, you get more concerned, you can turn to activism, which is extremely helpful, or you can turn to like turning in and denying or running. So theater just opens you up to the possibility of change. Look, how effective is art? I think it's quite effective, but I also know that for a lot of people, it's not effective at all. So we keep doing what we do.
And I would say I think it's important not to kind of make a hierarchy out of its potential real world impacts. There can be fantastic real world impacts. That play Kill Climate Deniers that I spoke about changed arts policy funding in Australia. In very positive ways. It was about to be cut and then kind of wasn't. My own production of The Tempest at the RSC led to, this is local, I'm quoting local Stratford Herald newspaper here, RSC production leads to uptake in litter picking. Fantastic. Or it might just change the way one person feels. And maybe they won't feel something and do something about that feeling straight away, but maybe they will in 5 years' time when they look at their grandchild. There are all kinds of different ways in which change happens. And we're not trying, my book is sort of deliberately provocatively titled 100 Plays to Save the World, but we save the world in lots of different ways, don't we? We save it incrementally, we save it slowly, we save it personally, we save it structurally, we save it in all kinds of ways. There isn't just one way to save the world.
Yes, absolutely. It's hopeful, but it's tricky. It's tricky because ultimately it's subjective, isn't it? For every individual. Yeah, I mean, it's subjective, and some people will be moved, and some people will be not moved, or some people will say, "Yeah, interesting, but let's go and have a drink at the bar."
What's most important is that we make the offer to the audience. Any way an audience reacts is a valid way, whether they hate it or love it, or it doesn't matter. Their response is valid, but our job is to continue to create ecodrama on stage that we make this offer to you and you do with it what you will. And we build these worlds. And I think that's so exciting. And I also think it's important to bring more ideas of the natural world, in particular animals, onto the stage in whatever form.
Yes. Thank you. Next question is addressed to both of you personally. Do you have any favorite anecdotes about audiences of your ecodrama? In other words, encouraging testimony about the ways in which these stories reach people emotionally and ecologically, encouraging them to think differently?
I mean, I can only talk about, the breathing hole. And then when I was at Stratford, I'm a playwright. I go into the washroom. That's where you hear at intermission about what people think of your play. During intermission and also after. And what makes me happy is when people have a hard time getting out of their seat because of what happens to the bear. That's my story. The other thing that I found interesting, and maybe this is slightly off the subject, was, when the Enemy of the People happened in New York in the spring, it was on Broadway. And then there's a section of the play where Dr. Stockman is doing the speech to the townspeople, trying to change their mind. And right in the middle of this, some guy walks into the theater from behind. He walks in and he says, "Excuse me, I'm from the Extinction Rebellion. And I just want to say, no theater on a dead planet. So people in the audience thought, oh shit, wow, this is interesting. This is part of the play. And don't forget, the play in New York, Amy Herzog's version, is set in Ibsen's time. They thought, oh wow, this is interesting. So I'm not sure what the actors on the stage did. One of them kept going, and one of them was uncertain. And then the person who walked in said something else, and then someone in the audience said something, and people started to realize, no, this wasn't part of the play. This is really interesting. So they started trying to get the guy out, and the security people came in, and then someone in the audience, so they got him out. And just before the play started up again, some audience member said, well, actually, I think he's right. And then another audience member said, look, shut up. And then somebody else said, oh, are you against what he's, or something like that. And then somebody said, write your own effing play. And then they got back to the play. But I thought that was incredible. Right? What you can do with, you have to set that up, and I'm going to, but that's so exciting for an audience. And it's also an incredible clash of everybody is right. Mm-hmm. Everyone is right. Anyway.
Maybe only in New York.
We have eavesdropping in common. That's basically how I build my shows during preview, by listening in on what people are saying. In the restrooms at halftime. Yes, just a very small thought is that I did a production of The Wind in the Willows last Christmas, a kind of a children's show. Do you know that book? Yeah. That book here. Kind of updated into today's Thames, which is a heavily polluted river in the UK. And it was a very beautiful show, actor musician show, lovely songs, beautiful Christmas, got lovely snow at the end, the works. And at halftime, there was a small child crying in the bathroom, and I just overheard that the mum was saying, why are you crying, darling? And this little child went, I want them to be my friends forever. I want Mole and Ratty and Badger and Toad to be my friends forever. And it was sort of awful but brilliant, I think, that this child had that feeling and would go out into the world with that feeling.
Yeah. Thank you. These are wonderfully stimulating questions, and here's another one, and touches on something we haven't mentioned, but is important. I think some people might think that ecodrama, if for no other reason, but it's about when plays are performed outdoors, Shakespeare in the park, and that sort of thing. Well, here's a question kind of about that. Outdoor environments are natural spaces to stage ecodrama, which are done in parks and forests and every summer around the world. So what advantages do outdoor productions offer for ecodrama? Do you have a favorite example of outdoor or indoor achievements in ecodrama?
So I was in Nova Scotia for a month just recently. A playwright friend of mine did an adaptation of Ernest Buckler's novel, The Mountain in the Valley. And unless you're older or from the East Coast, it's not well known, but it was a huge novel in its day. And it's about a farming family in the Annapolis Valley and the mountain. So I went to the production. It was on top of a mountain. So we sat like this, and let's say this is the lip of the mountain. There were 2 chairs, 2 risers. The costumes were incredibly simple because we're talking the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. The mosquitoes were terrible. So you go there and you spray yourself with bug spray. And because of that, I am driven by a golf cart up to the mountain, and the audience sits there. There's no lighting. There's no sound, right? So we start at 6:00. It's absolutely beautiful. We're actually 20 kilometers from where the author lived and died. Of course, it was expensive because there was 13 actors. But the show, the experience, the birds singing in the silence of the moments, it's a beautiful story. You know, you're listening to birds and you're stunned, and you see the actors go back down the upstage, which is basically they're going down the mountain. You can't see them anymore. It was an incredible experience for 2.5 hours. Now, you can't do that very often. And on days that it rains, you've got to put it inside. It's not quite the same show. But, you know, if the subject fits, if it's possible, I mean, you absolutely have to do it, because you actually don't need lights for a lot of things when you think about it.
Yeah, maybe we should add content, form, location,
Yes,
and methodology.
yes,
Maybe there should be
yes,
4 aspects. But yeah, I think to activate a location, I mean, being in the environment yourself naturally obviously creates a kind of an affective experience for the audience. You know, you are literally sharing time and space with the performance, and you're all being affected by the wider world. So the environment is naturally agental in that relationship. There's also something about scale that I think is very interesting that happens. You know, suddenly we're dwarfed by the sky, the horizon, the sort of whatever it is. So we're naturally what you were saying about dominion, that relationship is actually subverted often by some kind of outdoor production, which I think can be very useful to harness dramatically. A little experience I had, I experienced a piece of work called In This Place by Lydia Adetunji, it's an oral history play effectively, where the writer had interviewed different people who had worked in an environment. So they were sort of elders who'd worked in different ways in this particular environment through agriculture or stewardship or conservation, different kinds of things. And you went on a walk, you were given a map, and it's called binaural sound. So you have headphones on, and as you're walking, a GPS is kind of triggering what you're listening to. So if you get to a certain place, you're being told a story, perhaps by somebody who used to work there as 50 years ago as a farmhand or something. And you look to where her story once happened. And of course, the landscape has completely changed now through maybe there's a new building there, or maybe it's it's monocrop or something now rather than something much more benign for the environment. Or maybe you're walking somewhere else and you hear the story of somebody who's been working to save a particular species of flower that was once there, and she describes what it looked like, and you look over there and now it's like a raised, tarmacked over environment, and you kind of can't see it. And it was a very interesting way of kind of being in the environment, and being asked to notice the gap, like bear witness to the change through the voices of people who were still alive and who had lived that experience. So I found that a very effective and potent example of outdoor theatre.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'd answer the question or comment on the question in 2 different ways. I think you can think about outdoor productions as being both an opportunity for improvisation on the part of the actors who are performing the play. Do they invite the environment in? In other words, go back to one of the remarks I made at the very beginning, and we talked about the very beginning. Do we think of the environment as being an active participant in the show? So when things happen, of course, outdoor performances are always a challenge. Rain, sun, bugs, that sort of thing. Do actors perhaps work with some of that? Do they improvise the script that's that they're using in terms of that environment, and how far do you take that? And then there are situations in which not just rain and the usual kinds of things that are challenges for outdoor productions, but what we might say is inadvertent and modern environmental challenges, like performances that take place especially in Western North America. Again, in our Cymbeline in the Anthropocene project, there were productions in Montana, And my colleague Gretchen Minton is going to, who's here in the house today, is going to talk about this a bit later this afternoon. There were performances in Montana that were taking place when wildfire smoke, as it does virtually every year, rolls in from California or Oregon or Washington State, and it affects the actors and the audiences performing and watching the plays. And when I arrived, I first of all arrived in Bozeman, Montana. I saw the Montana Shakespeare in the Parks production twice, once in Bozeman and once in Missoula. And in Bozeman, the wildfire smoke was there. It was quite hazy, and I just really come off the plane almost, and I was watching the play, and my eyes began to sting. You know, there was the Anthropocene coming in and disrupting the play, and I had to go to the washroom at the interval and wash my eyes a bit because they were stinging. And for the second production in Missoula, I made the 3-hour journey driving, and I drove through this huge wall of fire smoke that I couldn't see. It was like in Canadian terms a whiteout in a snowstorm. I couldn't see anything practically except the taillights of the car in front of me. It was actually frightening, and the car stank and that sort of thing. And fortunately, there was only this corridor of smoke that was coming through, and it lifted mainly because I thought, well, if this is the way it is in Missoula, they'll never be able to perform the play. Fortunately, it did lift, but it was still very hazy, that sort of thing. And this becomes a question for actors and companies. This becomes a health safety issue. And it's become an issue, especially in Western North America, for actors' unions. When do we say, no, our actors are not going to perform in these conditions because those conditions are now shutting down the play? So it's not just rain or even bugs, but
it's also heat.
It's also heat.
They have a 30
heat and smoke.
Yeah, 30. Mm-hmm. If it's 30 Celsius, it's done inside.
Right.
Yeah,
there we are. So outdoor productions, we think of them as being jolly picnic kind of events, Shakespeare in the Park, Shakespeare in Central Park, that kind of thing, family events, but they're becoming trickier, that sort of thing.
Immersive
in both
theater.
Positive and negative ways.
Randall, I'm so sorry. It's not rain, bugs, anything. It's just time that's having to make us stop. Because you're coming back this afternoon with
Yes.
Professor Gretchen Minton from the Montana State University. So go get your tickets at the box office and come back, because we're going to continue a different part of this conversation this afternoon at 2:00. Thank you so much, everyone, for holding space today, for teaching us. It's a real delight to have you here. Thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
This event was recorded as part of the Meighen Forum in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Tom Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances housed by the Stratford Festival's streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, we're going to give you a gift. Enjoy 1 month free on Stratfest at Home with promo code FREEMONTH. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEMONTH to enjoy 1 month of free streaming content. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborator. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the T.R. Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is manager Yash Chabria, film editor Chris von Kleist, and director Jenna Dixon. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistants Renata Hansen and James Hyatt, coordinator Mira Henderson, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Michael Adams, Jennifer Lee, Greg Doherty, Harper Charlton, and Kendallin Bishop. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Ma Pi.